Welcome back. It took a bit of doing, but I finally managed to record myself a decent rats game. While advanced setup may have been a boon to us all, it does certainly make recording a little more difficult. We have a lot of red factions in this draft, and as valuable as this sword and boot are in my hand, I don't have the second rabbit card I would need to put down a stronghold for rabbit, and based on our current suits, I don't want to go into rabbit anyway. Since I'm the first one to set up, I'm just going to sit myself in the southern choke point on top of a fox clearing that I can use for this sword, which should also give me a pretty good chance of taking some of these ruins. Having secured the bottom half of the map, badgers and birds are relegated to the top, with birds playing the... What the hell? I'm especially fortunate to find that the river folk are in play, and they have the hammer available for only 2 warriors. So long as no one buys it, that gives me a great first turn craft that I can put immediately into my horde. The Warlord as a faction lives and dies on how quickly you can get items into your horde, particularly where prowess is concerned. The extra activity and recruiting you gain from prowess is what allows us to overwhelm the table over the course of a game, and the sooner we have these items, the better. With the board set, the Erie's first turn is as unorthodox as their choice of leader, simultaneously passive and vulnerable. I could punish this first turn, but there's no reason why anyone would want to. The real threat at this table is likely to be the badgers. While I have awkwardly relegated both of my opponents to the top half of the board, the badgers have half of the map to themselves, which means that their explosive scoring is going to be very difficult to police until I am at full capacity. My understanding is that this is the badgers' best map, and if they are given the opportunity to cross from west to east, they will win this game. The only lingering question is how adept is this player at piloting them? Their first turn is a mixed bag, delving and losing a retainer, but immediately replacing it with 2 bird cards. While this isn't the most intimidating turn they could have taken, this seems to me like the work of an experienced player who's mitigating their starting position. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Fortunately for me, my faction isn't half so complicated, and I can take my turn without engaging so much as the barest fraction of my mental capacity. We are going to buy that hammer, immediately craft it, and then spread across the center choke point and establish mobs on both sides. I would have preferred to have a second fox card in hand in order to build immediately next round, but we can mitigate that by going rowdy. With no build actions to take, we'll just occupy more space and get myself another point this turn. So long as no one comes after us immediately, we should be starting turn 2 with 4 items, which is a terrifying prospect for the rest of the table. Doubly so, as I have the bird card I need to build, and this ambush to keep me safe. On their turn, the birds kindly remind me that the only reason anyone picks the builder as an opener is because their hand is full of craftable items. True to this concept, they craft the tea immediately, which I will be stealing in short order. Somewhat less encouraging is their choice to sit on top of my lone warrior, signaling an intention to contest me on the next turn. They're not the worst enemy I could be facing, but I don't want to be facing them right now. With the start of the Otter's turn, I realized that every single one of us bought from the Otters on turn 1. God, I hate capitalism. While this early aggression is certainly disappointing, I can hardly claim that it's not the best choice the table could have made. My potential trajectory for turn 2 was very intimidating indeed, and digital players are hardly ignorant of the threat that the Warlord can pose. I have managed to take my pound of flesh in exchange, however, as the Otters have also been summarily reduced to a fraction of their warrior count. My other mob has been left intact, however, so as soon as it rolls mouse, I can return to try again. Right? On their turn, the badgers establish the 3 way stations that will fuel their card draw, a staple of competitive badger gameplay. They then mitigate my concerns somewhat by walking straight into the Otter's publicly visible rabbit ambush, denying themselves both warriors and future points on this turn. They do, however, continue maintaining a very bird-heavy retinue, which tells me that the Otters have done a good job of policing both of the table's foremost threats. On my turn, my mob removes the ruin, revealing the fucking bag, of course. The relentless mood is one of the most important ones I have, and it's no surprise that I would have it disabled immediately. The good news is that I find myself in a position where I could really use the extra warriors right now, so instead of keeping the bag around to provide relatively unhelpful command actions, I'm going to just go lavish immediately and get rid of it. With many of the ambush cards still unplayed, it does not yet behoove me to go attacking the birds just yet. One of the worst sins you can commit as the Warlord is to chase your sunk costs by overextending. as this will see you taking back-to-back losses you can ill afford. Instead, we'll lick our wounds for this round. We can always catch up later when everyone else is dead. It's a pivotal turn for the Eyrie, as they are almost out of space that they could take non-aggressively. With significantly more warriors available, if they chose to attack me here, collaboration from the Otters could ensure that my game plan is sunk for good. They choose to continue biding their time, however, taking the topmost clearing, but their choice to further reinforce their central roost betrays their concern over the amount of damage I could potentially cause to them, as if I couldn't just go around it. It is now the Otters' turn to lick their proverbial wounds, and they're going to do so by continuing their strategy of drawing the entire deck. It seems their luck is not stellar, however, as the most they manage to pull out is a tea and a League of Adventurous Mice, the latter of which they choose to craft. The Otters and I aren't ready to go head-to-head again quite yet, but the trade post that they've put down over on the east side is an ideal location for me to go and loot from both the Otters and the birds. The only catch is that I have to make sure to protect my buildings when I do so. While my prowess items dictate the amount of momentum I have when venturing out, it is my strongholds that I have to rely on my ability to bounce back in the event I take further losses. With only 2 on the board, I have to treat them with some amount of care. The Otters have delayed it for a round, but it is now time for the Keepers to take their big early game turn, one of 2 they hope to make throughout this game. I had expected the Keepers to take the safer southern mouse clearings, but it appears they're only able to recruit in Fox, which forces them into fighting in the central rabbit. What's bad for the Otters is probably good for me. The Badgers commit to wiping out the Otters here, and a couple of lucky rolls ensure that they do so without taking any losses. They do, however, choose to leave their relics out in the open, something that more competitive players would abhor. A more efficient Badger turn probably would have delved the jewelry right onto the way station so that they could be both recovered at once. My turn arrives, and I once again have the resources I'll need to start asserting dominance over the table. The only question is, who first? Taking 4 points worth of Badger relics is appealing, but not with 5 birds sitting at my back, waiting to collect all of my strongholds the moment I leave them. I'd been hoping the birds would have spread out their forces more in order to collect my mob token, but I'll have to take what I can get. Ensuring that no one remains alive to punish me for my hubris takes priority over collecting items, so it's time to knock the birds down a peg. While my plan was to battle the birds once and then loot them for that tea, unfortunately bad rolls in an ambush changed the calculus of this decision. While my second roll was more effective in removing birds, it sadly came at the cost of collecting more prowess items. Having been given the chance to punish me for my hubris, the Eyrie decides to craft Mouse Partisans, a card that will become very significant over the course of this game. For the moment, however, it counters my choice of the stubborn mood, meaning that the only thing that prevented me from losing more warriors was terrible rolls on the part of the birds. Whichever anxieties are growing through the bird player's head, however, have betrayed them, as their choice to avoid my mob token and battle me has left them unable to build their roost for this turn. While this has set back the current table frontrunner, it comes at the cost of the birds picking a more assertive leader to command their faction, and they do indeed choose the commander. While I would happily ignore the birds from this point, having 5 warriors with 2 extra hits per battle is a threat that I can't overlook. It is now the Otter's turn, and they must contend with the prospect of recovering from a near-total board wipe. Erring on the side of caution without favoring any particular opponent, the Otters recruit back up to a decent force of warriors, and in trying to avoid getting their warriors wiped again, they move into perhaps the worst possible place they could be on this map. If you are ever playing the Otters on Winter Map, never go here. Because if you ever lose the fight for rule in order to move, your warriors up here will be trapped forever. The Badger's turn arrives once more, and they're going to take the opportunity to finish cleaning out the left side of this map. In so doing, they also take the chance to remove my poor lone rat from his clearing. How rude. In taking this turn, however, the Badger's player has once again committed the cardinal sin of playing this faction. Never delve anything that you can't recover that turn. Bringing all of their relics to the central rabbit clearing has left them with more relics than their warriors can move, and delving off of their battle with me has left them with yet another relic that is now right at my doorstep. A brief perusal of the discard pile reveals that Fox is the only ambush yet to be played, and as such, the timing of my turn couldn't be better. For the uninitiated among you, whenever badgers have a relic in their clearing, they take less damage from battles, making them very hard to dislodge. But if you manage to destroy those relics, they're worth twice as much as normal cardboard. These 3 relics with their paltry protection represent an easy 6-point gain before considering oppression points, a turnabout that would reverse with a sad state of my current score. I use the relentless mood here to ensure my success, but I make one crucial error that I attribute to Root Digital's implementation. When presented with the option to move or battle using the relentless mood, the game does not use the same UI that you would get if you were using League of Adventurous Mice. Instead, it pretends that it's merely another turn action, and you need to be incredibly diligent to make sure that you do not accidentally move with it, because the UI workflow is identical to using prowess actions normally. Making this mistake would deprive you of the second battle that you had intended to use, and leave 4 points worth of cardboard on the table for otters to steal. I really hate that they did this, and I wish they would change it. Lacking a bird card to build, the Eerie takes an unambitious turn, destroying my mob and retaining their defensive posture. The number of roosts they still have on board is enough to get them catching back up to the table, however. The otters, having endured the terrible success of not being completely imprisoned by the rest of the table when they had the chance, take the logical course of action, walking across the board in order to delete these relics. Much like myself, the otters understand that the best place to put these relics is as far away from the badgers as we can get them. With the rest of their turn activity, they attempt to destroy my Warlord, an action that feels less than necessary given the current board position, but that I still have to respect as a proactive policing measure. On their turn, the badgers commit to punishing myself and the otters for our hubris in removing the relics. Where the otters are concerned, this is a prudent effort in policing the current table leader. In my case, it feels perhaps more like a bit of opportunistic vengeance. I think this course of action will ultimately not serve them that well, however. Seeing as they've cleared out the west half of the map of relics, their best course of action is to find a way to set up camp on the east side of the map so they can close out this game. By committing to policing us like this, they're only giving the table more time to outpace them to 30, and thinning their forces out in the process. My turn arrives to find me in a relatively sad state. At roughly half the score of the rest of the table, and having just lost my Warlord for the second time, my destiny might feel grim indeed. But all is not lost. So long as we make it difficult for the badgers to cross the map, I have free reign on this turn to finally go and collect those items everyone's been crafting. And to my great fortune, both the Eerie and the otters have made it incredibly easy for me. While the temptation exists to immediately apply these new actions in deleting the birds and collecting more points on my turn, I know that I would only be immediately punished as the commander would show up and delete my Warlord, invalidating the recruiting that I so desperately need at this moment. Once again, we will avoid overextending, but perhaps we'll take one more clearing in the... No, never mind. Apparently, the carnal gods I worship did not see fit for me to kill this creature. You live. For now. These warriors in the stubborn mood should suffice for keeping the rest of the table's attention elsewhere, however. On the Eerie's turn, they finally do hold the bird card they would need in order to build again. However, it seems they either lack the confidence to maintain that pace, or they intend to sandbag their scoring a little bit. Placing the card into Recruit is a fine option here, especially considering that it is one of the commander's greatest weaknesses. The choice to abandon their roost, however, is a little harder to explain. For the third time this game, the otters must contend with being nearly eliminated from the board. Their gains from the relics they destroyed catapulted them forward, but failed to catapult them ahead of their competitors. With only 7 funds to their name and 3 trade posts they've crafted so far, their situation has become dire indeed. Doubly so, as they continue to fail to find any valuable crafted items. They put a second false orders out onto the field, as well as the saboteurs. Beyond that, they draw like their lives depend on it. We have now firmly arrived at the point at which badgers must be contained if any of us are going to continue playing this game. Despite appearances, their score is largely irrelevant here. The question is rather how many of the relics can they acquire in a single turn. With every remaining relic being concentrated in a single clearing, any foothold they manage to establish in range of this clearing is a threat of victory. It also appears that the badgers and the birds are the ones who've been taking all the valuable crafted items from the otters. All this being said, it occurs to me during the editing process that we have the otters in this game. A single, very accessible purchase of riverboats would end the game here and now. I wonder if the Badgers player considered this. Tunnel vision is a very real challenge that can occur when playing Root, and sometimes it's very difficult to overcome. Regardless, the course of action the Badgers do take is to further police Bird, attempting to establish their foothold in the northern side of the map, further from myself. Rather than positioning themselves in order to encamp closer to their goal next turn, however, they choose to leave their warriors on top of the next Eerie Roost in line, with no build space available. Reaching my next turn, I finally get the mob roll I've been waiting for, now that it's too late to matter. But first, I have a riddle for you. Take a look at this board state, and tell me, who is currently winning? Is it the Birds, with their commanding board presence and score, and dangerous battles? Is it the Otters, capable of making impressive gains with no presence on the board whatsoever? Is it the Badgers, capable of terrifying scoring and currently owners of the left half of the map? Or is it this disease-ridden vermin, who hasn't even broken 10 points with only 1 clearing to their name? The answer is probably the Badgers, but we can fix that. Having filled our prowess track and recruited a decent sum of warriors, we have successfully completed the attrition half of our plan. Now it's time to complete the winning part. Out of the foes currently present on this board, the Birds have set themselves up to be turmoiled on recruit, and the Otters don't have quite enough funds to outpace me, though they could be a threat later on. So long as I make sure to take out the Badgers here, I'm in prime position to take advantage of the real estate crash I caused through my wanton violence. I take some hefty losses as a result, but I force the Badgers to choose between my Warlord and their goal of taking more relics. It is now the Birds' turn, and even if they weren't aware of the Badger threat, there has been little evidence to imply that they would attack me now. I am instead delighted to find that they are willing to contribute to Badger containment. The Birds have, however, continued to feed the Otters, who begin their turn with 10 funds this time. Not enough to set them into the lead, but enough that should they so choose, they could come after me and spoil my chances of victory. Thrice bitten and thrice shy, however, the Otters decide to establish some more warriors onto the map, and, against my own expectations and advisement, return to the northern quadrant, where neither I nor the Badgers can reach them. A very safe choice, but one that firmly rides on the rest of us failing to find the upper hand for the rest of the game. On the Badgers' turn, they lack the rabbit cards needed in order to overcome my rule in the southern choke point. Although, any attempt to ignore me puts them in the unenviable position of having me behind them, ready to crush whatever foothold they established. They commit then to destroying my Warlord and the mob token that I definitely worked super hard for. Then, they distribute their forces somewhat so they have a better chance of encamping next turn. The Badgers remain on a 1-turn clock, however, and the foundation they've established over in this corner of the board is sufficient that they could certainly recover the relics they need to win on their next turn. This is the challenge of playing the Badgers. Almost regardless of your score, if you are left alone for even a single turn, you will win the game. The Birds will not win next turn. The Otters will not win next turn. Thus, I must double down on cyberbullying this man out of existence. On my turn, I craft a sword for points, denying it to the Otters who had the other one in their hand. Lacking my recruiting from prowess, I am forced into making a risky decision. In order to lock down the Badgers while keeping my Warlord protected, I will abandon all of my buildings. I can afford for the Birds to clean up those points, and 3 warriors with the stubborn mood is about as best I can manage for my Warlord. On their turn, the Birds put a suited card into build, and they do exactly what I was hoping for. They thin out their forces guarding their mouse roosts. While I may have fed significant value to the Birds, it has come with 2 upsides. Firstly, their new score has made them a prime target for the rest of the table. Secondly, their choice of suited recruiting has left the rest of us an outlet to stop them from winning. On their turn, the Otters immediately demonstrate both of these, placing a trade post, wisely recruiting an extra warrior, and then battling the Eerie Roost. While they were ambushed for their trouble and failed to destroy the roost, the extra precaution they took ensures that they did not suffer trade disruption on top. I plan to contribute to this effort as well on my next turn, and so I send a message to the riverfolk to make their riverboats cheaper. Kindly enough, they oblige. The Keeper's turn is here, and I have left them in as terrible a situation as I can manage. A lone warrior, set as far as possible from all of their relics. The effect of this approach is a soul-crushing lack of agency for the Badger player, to the degree that, unable to recruit their way out of the lock I have put them in, the Badger's player instead opts to waste their turn. In chat, they lament my choice to not complete the full extinction of their species, but the cruel reality is, death is the only escape from dog jail. This is the only effective way to police Badgers who are a threat to win. Removing them from the board allows them a chance on their turn to pop up anywhere they want with a way station and warriors available. Any Badger warrior can turn into a way station. Therefore, the optimal version of dog jail is to have several warriors on top of the only Badger warrior on the map, with all of the available building slots full. While it would have been safer for me to place 2 strongholds in this clearing before evacuating it, I really want to start establishing my oppress scoring, and I want to leave as little to chance as possible against the birds. Unfortunate then that I have managed to forget about the mouse partisans they crafted some 15 minutes ago in this video. Able to further thin my limited forces with every battle, all it takes is some weak rolls for me to lose my fighting force almost entirely. Ultimately, these losses prohibit me from taking out both mouse clearings in a single turn, and rather than committing my Warlord to an ultimately suicidal and pointless quest, I will retreat back to my side of the board to claim what oppress scoring I can. The birds remain on at least a 2-turn clock. They could punish my Warlord, but they still need to fulfill their Fox build. Even with their superior board presence, they cannot achieve everything that they want to this turn. Instead, they choose to reduce what threats they can without turmoiling, by once again invading the Otter's personal space. Unable to replace their mouse roost, however, they remain vulnerable to the same plan if attempted again. My attempt at goading on the Otters reveals that they do not have quite the funds they want to be handling this situation by themselves. However, they are willing to contribute to the effort if I am willing to clean it up. It is interesting to note, however, that in the time since the pop quiz I gave you earlier, the Otters and Badgers have made 3 points between the two of them, while I and the Birds have made 10. This particular trend will continue on unabated as once again the Otters find themselves ambushed. I would describe this as a tragedy, but it's happened so frequently that it's starting to rhyme. Sadly, despite ample precautions this time, high rolls on the Birds' part ends up destroying their trade post regardless, refunding the remainder of their funds to me. The Otter's turn is ended, but their sacrifice is not in vain, as 2 warriors is far easier to clear. The Badgers, however, have finally found themselves in a position to recruit. However, having only 4 warriors to work with means that any attempt to gather relics from the central clearing would be enormously risky. The Eerie's inevitable use of mouse partisans would leave the Badgers stranded, guaranteeing an Eerie win barring my own intervention, which would probably delete the Badgers en route. Perhaps seeing these possibilities for themselves, the Badgers commit to the bird policing cause. Another set of high rolls removes both the other mouse roost and all of the Badger warriors, with the last one standing being used to clean up cardboard and recover the only relic they are able. This very admirable turn has also put the Badgers back in the front running, and the Eerie and Otter players are despondent, believing their win inevitable. Unlike them, however, I have spent literal months harassing Joshua Yearsley while playtesting this faction, so I understand its weaknesses. While the most optimal course of action here is to place those 2 strongholds I mentioned earlier, it's equally true that the Badgers only have 2 cards in their hand, so even in the best of circumstances, they can only recruit up to 4 warriors in this clearing. While a world does exist, the Badgers could buy cards they need to recruit from the Otters. The warriors I have here, as well as the stubborn mood, makes it prohibitively difficult for them to fight through me. On their turns, the Eerie establishes a new leader in the Despot, a potential threat, genuinely, as the Otter's trade posts represent a potential burst of points that the Eerie could use to win. As the Badger's turn comes around, their recruiting capacity is revealed to be a single Saboteur's card. Unable to move at the start of their retinue, they remain firmly within the grip of dog jail, dog jail, dog jail, dog jail. They do not appreciate me chanting dog jail. My turn arrives again, and it is my most tenuous one yet. All of us have arrived within a stone's throw of victory, and while the mouse mob token I so painstakingly established has brought me yet another point, I am unable to score 7 points in a single turn. What I can do, however, is cock-block the rest of the table and drag this game out even longer still. It has nearly been 2 hours. Finally remembering how to establish Dog Jail properly, I build my 2 strongholds and then move to destroying the Eerie Warriors, as well as their necessary cardboard. With most of the crafting depleted by this point, this prevents them from winning the game. As I wait for my opponents to take their turns, I take my chance to describe the purpose of the Dog Jail joke to our Badger player. It is, regrettably, a necessary evil born of Badger's scoring patterns. I would love if they were a more stable scoring presence, with a more significant board presence overall befitting their red faction standing, but we must respond to the situation with which we are presented. Having been reduced to a mere 2 funds, the Otters are also unable to win the game, but they do take their opportunity to live up to the Riverfilth Company name. Fully ensconced in Dog Jail, the Badgers briefly seek desperately for a means of escape, but none will be forthcoming. They cannot encamp, so they cannot recruit or craft, and they cannot leave due to rule. The only escape from this position is to hope for a suicidal battle against me, an action that will only liberate them next turn. Understanding the futility of their situation, the Badger player resigns. Having no need to prolong the game any further, I establish the oppressed scoring I need, and take my rightful place. And that is a textbook Rats game. Thank you all very much for watching, and as always, subscribe or don't, I'm not your dad.